Alright, for this video, I want to talk about some of my favorite Iggy Pop solo albums and show some of the pressings I have of them and some clippings as well. Iggy's my favorite figure in music. I'm very obsessed with him, so it feels all very fitting for my first video. Alright, so the first album I'm going to talk about is Kill City. So I have two copies of Kill City on vinyl. This first one is an original copy. This is a promo copy as well. So it has the suggested cut sticker and then the hole punch over here in the corner. And then this is the green variant. And then the other one I have is the last pressing Bomp did of Kill City in 2024, and then this is just the blue vinyl variant. So Kill City was recorded in 1975 and then put out by Bomp Records in 1977. And it's interesting because it's not really an Iggy solo album because him and James wrote the songs together, but it's also not a Stooges album either just because it's only him and James writing the songs. So it's really its own thing within Iggy's discography. And what makes it so interesting for me is that it's so autobiographical to the life Iggy was living at this point. It's post-Stooges, pre-Iggy solo. So it's just kind of this weird limbo era where he's down and out in LA, humiliated, living this very, very rough life. And despite having this whole doomed atmosphere surrounding him and his career, Iggy and James got together and made this incredible album. And then about it being so autobiographical, you listen to the album and you really get a sense of, this rough life Iggy was living. On the title track, like No Sense of Crime, Beyond the Law, literally any song off of Kill City, I think, perfectly depicts Iggy's life at this point. It really only could have been made by Iggy and James in LA at that time under those circumstances. And it's interesting too because there's not a ton of information about this era, and by listening to Kill City and doing some further research, you can kind of piece together and analyze what was going on at this point. I could just go on and on with Kill City. I just think it's so interesting because it's such an overlooked part of Iggy's life and career, but it also explains a lot as well. So Kill City related clipping I have is this is from Cream magazine. It's from April 1978, and it reads, "Don't monkey around. Kill City is a landmark album recorded in 1975. It's as powerful, unyielding, and solid as anything Iggy's ever done, maybe even more so, and now it's finally available for your dining and dancing pleasure." I'm glad Cream magazine was, praising Kill City like this. My next album I'm going to talk about is, of course, The Idiot. This is Iggy's official debut as a solo artist. So I have two copies of The Idiot. This first one is a US original press, on RCA Records. And then the other copy I have is the reissue. It's the Virgin reissue, and I believe it's from 2017. So The Idiot was recorded in 1976 and then put out by RCA Records March 18th, 1977. And, it was the first collaboration between Iggy and David Bowie, and it's just one of the most influential albums of all time. It birthed post-punk, influenced, goth and industrial music and all these other genres. So The Idiot is interesting because I think everyone does have a different perspective on the album. I've seen some people say that, The Idiot is just a Bowie album that Iggy sings on, or other people say that Bowie was corrupting, Iggy's artistic sensibilities, and that's why The Idiot sounds like that, and it doesn't sound like a Stooges album. I really don't think it's one way or the other. I just think the very nature of Iggy and Bowie's friendship and them collaborating allowed them to experiment in ways they both couldn't on their own. And I just think because they felt such artistic freedom, that's why, you get some of the most daring and innovative music from both Bowie and Iggy. And also with The Idiot, I sometimes think people undermine what Iggy was bringing to the album because they focus more on, what Bowie was doing. But really, Iggy brings as much to the album as Bowie does, with just like how harrowing his vocals are, and also him, improvising so many of the lyrics on the spot in the studio. Like for me, I just think about a song like Mass Production, and I think Iggy's vocals on that song make the album as much as Bowie's, instrumentation and arrangements on it. I don't know, I just think The Idiot is a perfect album for both Iggy and Bowie, and it's just some of both of their best work. So I have this clipping related to The Idiot. It reads, "What others imitated, Iggy originated," which is so true because, if you think about it, it's 1977, The Idiot just came out, and, 77, the punk explosion, and Iggy's already moved on to post-punk, which would again be imitated in 1979. And a part of his clipping reads, "Now Iggy Pop has made the most revolutionary and musical album of his legendary career," which is so true. You think about it, like, it's only been 10 years and Iggy has changed music many times over, and he's doing it yet again with his first solo album. So the next Iggy album I'm going to talk about is his most classic solo album, Lust for Life. So this is actually my favorite Iggy solo album, which is like, okay, basic pick, but this album really is very special to me, and it is a big part of, where my Iggy obsession started. And at the moment, I only have one copy of the album. It's just the 2017 Virgin reissue. I'm sure one day I will have many more cool pressings of it in my collection. So Lust for Life was recorded in 1977 and then released later that year in 77. And it's the second, collaboration between Iggy and David Bowie. And this one is a bit less Bowie influence, but of course he's still on the album and contributed so much to it. So yeah, I would say Lust for Life isn't as artistically, daring or experimental as The Idiot is, but it does have its moments, and I think Turn Blue is the best example of that. And I would even say that could be Iggy's best song as well. I would say Lust for Life is very much classic Iggy, it's more garage rock sounding. The lyrics are more witty and introspective and poetic, all at the same time. I just think Lust for Life is everything Iggy does best. And I do think because Iggy and Bowie were very competitive, this is Iggy really pushing himself, on Lust for Life to make a more classic Iggy album. And I don't know, maybe this is a very silly reason to say, but I think the reason why I love Lust for Life so much is that it's just so fun to listen to. Like, I think there's just like a very like manic and exciting energy, coming from everyone that played on the album. And as the listener, you really hear that, and then because of that, I just have such a fun time listening to it. It's just like pure bliss for me to listen to. So I have this Lust for Life clipping that I find a little bit unsettling, which I'll explain, but it's cool though. It says, "Is there rock after punk? Lust for Life, a new album by Iggy Pop." And the reason I find it unsettling is because they really airbrushed him on this photo. Like, he has no eye bags and all his little smile lines on his cheek are gone. If you compare it to the original photo, it's like pretty noticeable, but whatever, it's still a very cool clipping. So the last album I'm going to talk about is definitely an odd pick, but I'm very passionate about this album. It is Zombie Birdhouse. Yes, believe it or not, this is one of my favorite Iggy Pop solo albums. I have 3 copies of Zombie Birdhouse. This one is an original US press. This one is an original Japan press with the OB. And then, believe it or not, I have the Zombie Birdhouse test pressing as well. So Zombie Birdhouse was released in 1982 on Animal Records, which was Chris Stein's label, and Chris Stein, helped out with the album as well. It is so odd and so bizarre. I'd love to know the thought process behind this album. I have so many questions. Despite how far out there Zombie Birdhouse is, I find it very interesting. I just think it's a really cool album for Iggy, despite how insane it is. So I have my own theory as to why Zombie Birdhouse, sounds the way it does. Prior to Zombie Birdhouse, Iggy had 3 albums on Arista Records, and Arista was like very pushy about some sort of, commercial hit or commercial breakthrough with Iggy. And with each album he did for them, he strayed further and further from that. So I just assumed that once that contract was finished, he wanted to make the most bizarre album imaginable because there was no one to please, no label to please, and that's how we got Zombie Birdhouse. And honestly, I think some of Iggy's best songs are on this album, actually. I would say Platonic or Ordinary Bummer are some of his best work. Run Like a Villain is such a fun song too. And I do think you have to be a crazy fan to like Zombie Birdhouse. I mean, like, a song like Street Crazies is kind of unlistenable to the average person. There also is some interesting context about Zombie Birdhouse. There's not a ton of information on like the actual making of the album. I really wish there was. I believe it was after the album was recorded, but before it came out. Iggy took a trip to Haiti with then girlfriend Esther Friedman, and this trip is so insane. It's all documented in his biography, Open Up and Bleed. They went to Haiti. Iggy interrupted some voodoo ceremony, had a curse placed on him, and everything just went downhill. They lost all their money. They got into like car accidents. They kept trying to leave Haiti, but something kept holding them back. Iggy was acting very odd. He gave away all their possessions. So much went down on this trip. It's actually unbelievable. I think this is some of the craziest, Iggy lore there is. But I just think knowing that insanity paired with the musical insanity of Zombie Birdhouse makes it a very interesting listen. So I actually am going to show 2 Zombie Birdhouse related clippings I have just to, prove how passionate I am about this album. But this first one is just a little advert for the record. And this one is actually one of my favorites from my clippings collection. So it's for Animal Records, advertising Gun Club's album Miami, and then Iggy's Zombie Birdhouse. And it's from a French magazine, and I just love it so much because the Gun Club is like one of my favorite bands, and then Iggy is like my favorite person in music. So for both of them to be on the same label at the same time putting out 2 of my favorite albums, I just love. So yeah, those are some of my favorite Iggy Pop solo albums. Of course I have more, but those are the ones I'm most passionate about. So thank you for watching, and I hope you got to learn something new about Iggy.